What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here, and happy Easter. Thanks for spending your Easter with us and our family. Stay to the end of this video for a special Easter guest that is waiting to say hi to you at the end of this video. But this is your $1,400 third stimulus check update and fourth stimulus check update. We'll be covering and focusing more on fourth stimulus going forward and the infrastructure slash stimulus package, the next stimulus package more going forward, as more and more people have already received their $1,400 third stimulus check. We'll be focusing on the next upcoming round of stimulus. We'll still be covering third stimulus a little bit for the people that haven't gotten it. Remember, if you're on Social Security and you haven't gotten it already, you're most likely pending for the 7th, April 7th, which is this Wednesday. You can find this out by the IRS Get My Payment tool or by checking your bank account that you get your deposits at to see what day you're pending for. The vast majority of people seem like they have already gotten their $1,400 third stimulus check yet. Let me know down below if that's the case with you or if you're pending for April 7th. I've seen some people from the VA say they've gotten their $1,400 as well. Congratulations. But I think that there's still a lot of the VA that is going to be receiving theirs in the future. I'll keep you up to date on that. If you're not part of this direct deposit and you're not from the VA, it's very likely you'll be receiving it in the mail. The IRS Get My Payment tool will be updating. You could check that after the video here today. And it's very possible the more we go into the future, the more likely it is that you will receive your check in the mail or a debit card in the mail. So please keep that in mind if you haven't gotten it yet. And if you haven't gotten the second stimulus check yet, the $600, the only way to get that at this point is to file a simple tax return or file a tax return for 2020. You have to get this by claiming a by filing a tax return. Even if you don't normally do that, you can just go to Google and type in IRS free file, and you can go to an IRS webpage and file a free tax return where then you can claim your $600 or your $600 per person, and depending on how many you're getting, how many people are on your tax return that you're claiming. It's on line 30. You put the amount that you are owed. Also, there's a little trick you can do if you didn't get the first and the second stimulus check. Let's say that you were claimed as a dependent, an adult dependent. Let's say you're a college student, and you can go back and actually get the first and second stimulus check. So let's say that last year you were claimed as a dependent, but you haven't filed your 2020 tax returns yet. You can go and file your tax returns this year as not a dependent, and the person who claims you as a dependent will have to file as not a dependent. And you can go back and claim the first and second stimulus checks, so $1,200 and $600 for 2020 by filing as not a dependent. Again, on line 30, you put the amount owed to you for a stimulus check. So keep that in mind. That can actually get you at an extra $1,800 for $1,200 and $600. The third stimulus check, remember, that has $1,400 for everybody, all dependents included, adult dependents and college students dependents. But remember, the third stimulus check money goes to the people who claim them as a dependent. So if I claim Julian, my 2-year-old son, and I also claim my mother as an adult dependent, I'm going to get $1,400 for me, $1,400 for my son, and $1,400 for my mom. So mom has $1,400 earmarked for her, but it's going to go to the person who claims them as a dependent. And this will likely be the same way for the fourth stimulus check, because the Democrats set that up all on their own. They changed it for the third stimulus check, and the fourth stimulus package, the infrastructure package, will likely have multiple different stimulus provisions in there. And every day that grows more clearer, we're seeing that the Democrats are likely going to have to pass this bill completely on their own again through the reconciliation process. Senator Bernie Sanders says that they're already gearing up to pass this next package through the reconciliation process, and they're already in the stages of this, as President Biden has already unveiled the first half, the physical structure of the infrastructure, the physical roads and bridges. And we'll talk about the second half here in this video, called the human infrastructure that we're expecting along with stimulus in this next package. So That's all the stimulus regarding third stimulus check. If you haven't gotten it yet, it's very likely you'll receive it on April 7th. If you don't receive it on April 7th, then it's very likely more in the future that you will receive it via in the mail, a check in the mail, or a debit card in the mail. Unless you're with the VA, then you could be receiving it hopefully the week after, April 14th. But if you're not from the Social Security or from VA, it's very likely you're going to receive it in the mail. If you have any questions, comment down below. I try to cover the most frequently asked questions in all of my upcoming videos. Next up, for the fourth stimulus package, the infrastructure package, here is the Mississippi governor on the infrastructure package and how it actually needs to be more money.
Let's turn to President Biden's new infrastructure bill. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives your state a D- for your roads and bridges. Almost 1 in 10 bridges in Mississippi are structurally deficient. The number of roads in poor condition is double the national average. A winter storm just knocked out water in your state capital for weeks. This legislation would commit more than $100 billion to fix roads and bridges. Could Mississippi use the help?
Well, there's no doubt that Mississippi could use our fair share of $100 billion. The problem with this particular plan, though, is although the Biden administration is calling it an infrastructure plan, it looks more like a $2 trillion tax hike plan. To me, that's going to lead to significant challenges in our economy. It's going to lead to a slowing GDP, and it's going to lead to Americans losing significant numbers of jobs. Infrastructure, Jake, is an area where Republicans and Democrats ought to be able to come together and do something good for the country. But as you mentioned, this plan spends $110 billion on roads and bridges and spends more than that on the combination of Amtrak and public transit. And what's even worse, it spends $100 billion on clean water, which Mississippi could certainly use, but it spends more than that on subsidizing electric vehicles. $155 billion to subsidize electric vehicles. That is a political statement. It's not a statement on trying to improve our infrastructure in America.
In fact, real quick, on that electrical vehicle subsidies, there's likely going to be a lot of rebates, new rebates in the future if you buy an electric vehicle, that you might receive thousands of dollars in either rebates or a tax credit from this new infrastructure package. Similar to the cash for clunkers that we've seen in the past, it's now going to be like cash for electric vehicles or cash for clunkers in electric vehicles going forward. And this could mean Tesla stock really skyrockets in the future. I personally see Tesla as a long-term play because there's a lot of electric vehicle potential in the future. You think about electric vehicles right now in cars, and there's really less than 5% of vehicles that are electric vehicles. But I feel like over the next 20 years, it's going to be dramatically different. I feel like at some point we're going to be over 50% electric vehicles. And this new program is going to have either rebates or tax credits, depending on how they structure it, to buy an electric vehicle.
A statement on trying to improve our infrastructure in America. And so it looks more like the Green New Deal than it looks like an infrastructure plan. But if the Biden administration will do what the president has said he wants to do, which is work with Republicans, I believe we can come up with a plan that we can afford, one that we can pay for, and one that truly invests in the infrastructure needs of this country. And there's no doubt that Mississippi, like virtually every other state, could use federal support. Infrastructure is a core function of government. It is something that the federal government, the state government, and local government should spend more of our resources on, but we don't have to hike taxes by $2 trillion to do it.
Well, how do you pay for it then?
Well, I think you pay for it in a number of different ways. One way you pay for it is by seeing significant improved economic growth. We saw that throughout the Trump administration because the policies were pro-business, they were pro-growth, and revenues improved. Now, unfortunately, during those 4 years, like the 4 years before that, they did not in Washington get control of spending. They feel as if the debt doesn't matter. You're looking at a debt burden today of nearly $30 trillion for Americans. And what's ultimately going to happen, and it's already happening, as interest rates rise, the share of our annual budget that goes to pay for interest expense is going to rise from what is already an enormous level of 15 to 20% of all federal revenues goes to pay interest expense.
Right.
That is not sustainable over the long term.
Yeah, that doesn't really answer the question as to how do you pay for it, though. It actually provides examples of how it's even more complicated than that. Governor Tate Reeves, thank you so much.
That was crazy there. He kind of challenged the Mississippi governor there and was like, hey, you want more infrastructure, you want to spend all this money, but how do you pay for it? And he was like, he was kind of like a deer in the headlights for a second there. And he's saying, well, yeah, we need more infrastructure. And his state alone has a D minus rated for infrastructure. And he's saying, yeah, we need all this infrastructure, but don't raise taxes. And that shows you how it's like, well, how are you going to pay for it? And that shows you how it's a very complicated situation. And remember, every single year, the U.S. before this infrastructure and underneath President Trump, underneath President Biden, underneath President Obama, the U.S. government runs a deficit every single year, and a lot of people worry about that. But I tend to think that that is literally just the way things are. We have $30 trillion in debt, and it just is what it is. We still have to focus on improving our country, improving our infrastructure, building jobs, getting our economy back on track, getting out of the pandemic. And most economists will say now is not the time to worry about the government deficit. And I personally think that the government deficit, if you look back in history, it's very rare that you even see a single year that the government doesn't have a deficit. So I kind of feel like people should just get used to that. And it's what it is. We print our own money, so do other countries. Other countries have deficit, we have deficit. And really, there's almost no way to get out of the deficit. We will probably never pay off that $30 trillion. It's just kind of the way things are. And yeah, we will pay our own interest on our own deficits with our own money. And I know for some people that'll sound kind of crazy, but we still have to continue moving forward and growing our economy and building infrastructure and doing the things that we need to do. And honestly, if we focused all our efforts on the deficit, we would send ourselves into a Great Depression instantly. Because if we tried to pay off $30 trillion and just cut everything and raise taxes to the roof, which will honestly never happen. No president will ever want to do that, Democratic or Republican. It's just not going to happen. I mean, when you look at President Biden's tax raises, they're relatively tiny. I mean, he wants to raise the top tax rate for people making over $400,000 from 37% to 39.6% for people, making over $500,000 a year. And he wants to raise the corporate tax 21% to 28%. It used to be 35% before President Trump. Trump lowered it down from 35%. So realistically, yeah, there'll be some tweaks, whether it's a Democratic president or a Republican president. I pride myself on being a realist, not being Republican or Democrat. Sometimes I agree with Republicans, sometimes I agree with Democrats. And I do think that corporations need to pay more of their fair share of taxes. Specifically, we see Amazon with $11 billion in profit paying $0 in federal taxes. Well, I mean, that's where you make up a little bit of the deficit. And we just seen that new recent report that said 91 out, so we'll just round to 100 out of the top 500 S&P 500 companies paid $0 in federal tax in 2020. And even worse than that is these companies are getting between the 91 of them, they got $3.5 billion in tax credits or tax rebates. So the government actually paid them to make billions and trillions of dollars, and they paid no tax, and we paid them. That's where you just need to make changes where it's just like instead of paying corporations that are making billions of dollars, giving them tax credits, they need to be paying their fair share of tax. You make small changes like that, and that goes a long way towards the trajectory of the deficit. It's really a trajectory that matters more because you're never going to pay off $30 trillion in a year. They'll probably never pay off $30 trillion ever. But it's the trajectory. It's how much debt you're adding every year. But even so, is that almost all economists now say, don't worry about the debt right now because right now we need to worry about the economic crisis and the pandemic, which really go hand in hand. Let's get out of that, and then we can worry about the debt. Let me know your thoughts if you disagree or agree down below in the comments. And that's why ultimately I do think we will end up seeing at least a single fourth stimulus check, as we're seeing multiple different proposals for a fourth stimulus check in this next package, as well as we're going to see a lot more things besides just a stimulus check. We're going to see student loan debt forgiveness. We're going to see infrastructure. We could see other types of debt forgiveness. And really, the Democrats are pushing for not even just one stimulus check, but multiple monthly recurring stimulus checks until the pandemic is over. We have two different proposals here from Senator Ed Markey and Elizabeth Warren for $2,000 monthly stimulus checks. And then we have the other one from Michigan Representative Rashida Tlaib for a $2,000 one-time stimulus check and $1,000 recurring monthly stimulus payments. In fact, these payments would actually supercharge our economy and get us out of the recession or the depression way faster. And that's where it really comes down to what you're looking at as part of the recovery effort. Are you looking at the deficit, or are you looking at getting jobs back and getting the economy back to the levels they were before the recession? Really, if you're not looking at the deficit, the number one way to probably get us back to where we need to be with jobs and people having money to spend, which gives companies money, companies then have money to hire people, would be to do the monthly stimulus checks. Because, like we said, if people now have money and they're able to go out and spend it, companies would then be able to hire more people and be able to spend more money on their own company infrastructure and build everything up for the future. It would be a lot more than just a short-term cash injection, because, like we said, companies would then have the money to build for the future because they'd be taking in a lot more money. Profits would hit, near all-time records or short-term records, because people would have money to spend. They'd have money for rent, money for food, money for discretionary spending, money to fix up their house and get them out of the hole, as well as get companies out of the hole. Remember, we've already had over 20% of small businesses have already gone out of business from this pandemic. And probably one of the best ways to give them money is by giving people money to spend. It gets people out of the economic hole, and it also brings businesses out of the hole with them. Hi. Can you tell everybody Happy Easter? What's with this rash on your face? You gotta stop drooling. Yeah. Hey, tell everybody what you did outside for Easter today. Eggs! You found eggs. How many eggs did you find? 1, 2, 3, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. And what was inside the eggs? Surprise. A surprise. What type of surprise? Candy. Candy. And what else? Gummies, watermelons. Gummies and watermelons, yeah. What else did you get today? Tell them about the presents you opened. What were inside the presents? There was a surprise. Surprise. Did you tell them you got a toolkit? Yeah. A baby toolkit? Yeah. Ooh, that was my stomach. I'm hungry. Hey. Can you say to everybody, Happy Easter? Happy Easter! Say, we love you. We love you! Say, we'll see you next time. We'll see you next time! Yeah, you gotta point like that. Say, we'll see you next time. We'll see you next time! Say, bye-bye. Bye! Give me my puppy. Okay, we'll give you your poppies.